My name's Becca Tan, this is Making LARP, and this week we're going to talk about death. Now, character death is always something that's really difficult to deal with. You will be dealing with your own emotions, other players' emotions, other characters' emotions, to the fact that your character has just died. Now, this was brought up to me and sort of made me start thinking about it by the fact that 11 characters died at the most recent Lions event. Now, I wasn't able to attend, but from the reactions that I've seen unfolding in the last few weeks, it's something that was really emotional to a lot of players and characters, that there was A, such a high body count, and B, some very long-standing characters died. And a lot of these have now moved on and decided that they're going to join other factions, other groups, and get that little bit of emotional distance from the characters that they've been playing. So I kind of want to talk to you all about why this happened, how to deal with it, the sort of things that I've picked up over the years, having watched a lot of characters die and having died several times as different characters myself, and the sort of ways that you can make this better for yourself and those around you. Now, first things first, there are really three types of character death. There's unplanned death, there's planned death, and there's sort of planned death. Now, very simply, a planned death is one that you've arranged with a storyteller team or something that you simply plan to do and it happens. So, for example, you die in downtime. You go down to the game's control of your system, or you talk to your storyteller and say, look, I want to retire the character, I'm not going to come back to it, I'm going to kill her off. Now, you could retire the character and leave a space for it to come back as a minor NPC role, as a monster or whatever, but you can just kill off your character in downtime. They go off to visit family and they never come back, or they never turned up, and you can have a little bit of plot there with the members of your group finding out, you know, actually she died. And that can have an interesting bit of story and deal with the other characters' reactions to that. Now, an unplanned death is where it simply happens, whether through the actions of the monsters, whether it's through other players. You might be expecting it in or out of character as a reaction to certain actions you've taken, or because you're going to a high threat event, but it's not in any way orchestrated by the STs to kill you off in particular. There's no sort of plan that your character's going to die, it's just that particular set of circumstances happen. Now, depending on the system and the game you're going into, you'll probably have a good idea of how likely that is to happen. For example, a very low threat social game, it's unlikely that's to happen, and therefore when it does, it can be quite of a shock and cause shock reactions to yourself personally and to the other players and characters. If you're in a high threat system or particular game, for example, as I mentioned, the 11 characters dying in one weekend, or if, say, you're going into a zombie game or a Cthulhu game, something where there's a chance that there's going to be a total party kill as part of the setting, then you will probably have a little bit more emotional armour to do with that, and sort of a camaraderie with those that have died around you out of character. So that can help mitigate the blow somewhat, as much as it ramps up the terror threat, the fear factor for other characters. And that also gives you an opportunity to have other people that are out of character, whether that's the people that died, the monster team that have killed you, to riff around, right, what's my next character going to be? You know, do you have something in mind? Do you go to move groups or factions? Time to decompress and get excited about your next character can actually be really useful. The third type of death is what I would call semi-planned. This is where you basically turn over your character to the storytelling team. You've come to them and said, look, I'm getting tired of this character, I'm burnt out, I want to do something else, but I don't think it's fair to just retire them, because it wouldn't be in character for the character to do that, to just wander off into the sunset. And you come up between you with a situation that's going to ultimately lead to you getting killed, turned to the dark side, or otherwise written out of the story. And this can be something that happens as a one-off thing. So for example, you talk to the storyteller and then later that night you get assassinated, but you wouldn't know in or out of character when that's going to happen. You just know that it's going to happen at a particular event or on a particular night. And that would allow you some opportunity to plan around that in terms of making sure you have alternate kit. Now for something like becoming an NPC role, for the record I'm talking about NPCs in their generic meaning. For those that do play LT, NPCs in LT, and NPC stands for non-player character, is a specific term given to those that are the in-character faction rulers. As I've mentioned before, LT, the factions sort of work as countries, so everyone that plays has a faction that they're a part of, and that's where they camp with, that's sort of the country they belong to, and will either have a group that they belong to, which is a subsection, whether that's particularly based around an area or based around a order, for example an order of knights, or a family, or they could just be generically people of the Lions, and that indicates that they don't have a specific group. But generically, NPC is a non-player character. This is generally a role played by the storyteller or monster team. Could be a recurring role. You often see in video game terms something like a shopkeeper or a quest giver as referred to as an NPC more than you would a main character of the storyline that isn't played by the player. But in LARP, it's generally more of a recurring role sort of thing. So you could ask to become an NPC. As I mentioned, you could turn to the dark side, you could have some plotline happen to where you're kidnapped, you could have a variety of different events that would allow you to start playing a new character, or you could have just know that you're going to be in a plotline and the end result of this plotline is you're going to die. Normally, if a character death is planned, it's planned with the approval of the player, usually at the request of the player. I'm not aware of any particular plot lines where a storyteller has come to a player and said, look, we need to kill you off. Though I'm sure it has happened perhaps to those that are officially LT style NPCs, where they are much more controlled in the nature of what they're told to do. Another term you might see used is DPC, direct player character. This is a term that's more general advisement of the storytellers. For example, a storyteller might want a particular type of character to turn up, or might give someone a task or a role or a background to play with, but majority of the actions are going to be the character's own, but they may, for example, be reporting back to someone. If your DPC character is an assassin, obviously that's going to be a high threat level, that's going to be a way that your character might get killed, but just as equally if it's some sort of mystical wibbly forcing you to do it, the other characters might work out what's causing it and stop it and heal you if that's what you are wanting, or that might be the point where they try and do mind healing, you go boom. And again, that's the sort of thing that could be logistically worked out with the storyteller if that's something you want. So we've talked about the types of death, and there are many more types than I described, but that's the general sort of main three. But you also have to look at what death does. Death, as much as it ends one character story, is actually normally a big catalyst for other people's story. Whether that's the death of someone important to your group or faction or just your character, they will generally cause a reaction amongst those around them. Now, one thing I know that I've been guilty of in the past that I think is always worth advising newer players is this is a reaction other people need to have. Whether that's crying and wailing, whether that's lashing out at other people, and it can be quite difficult for you as a player who's just died to take that step back and let it happen. Because you are now out of character, there's a lot of temptation for you to be lying back in your dead form, gossiping, planning out your new character, especially if there are other dead people around you, talking, laughing it off, saying, yay, I finally died, because you've been trying to get yourself killed off. And I know I've personally done it in the past, but as a more experienced role player, I would really advise, where you can, shutting up, trying to kind of go, well, I'm dead, I'm not here anymore, and letting other people have their reactions around you, especially if it's a time where combat is still going on, or in that first kind of 5 to 10 minutes where they've just discovered you. Maybe they're wanting to move your body around, have some mourning time, and then once that bit's over and the intense part is done, you can kind of drop out of character a bit and have a little chat about what's going on, and people will want to check in with you out of character and make sure you're okay, because it can be very upsetting, especially if you are playing a long running character, someone you've invested a lot of time into, to lose that. And it can, if it's unplanned, come as a very big shock. So people do want to check in and make sure you're okay, and you're okay with how things happened. This might especially come from the monster team. Monsters, as a general rule, aren't looking to kill characters unless they've been given specific instructions that they're out to assassinate someone, or that they, you know, should purposely try and kill characters to properly scare people. They're generally not out to do it. They're there to make your event fun, and if you're crying because your character's died, then they're going to feel pretty bad about it. So, you know, you will get people wanting to check in. It is something that, where possible, you want to try and take a step back and let other people kind of enjoy the roleplay moment for what it is. Another thing to take into consideration about your character dying is, what are you going to do afterwards? Now, a lot of this will depend on the time constraints you're under. If you are a couple of hours towards the end of the event, or it's the last day, which in LT is generally a half day, finishing by maybe 3-4 o'clock, you might not want to bring in your brand new full-on character concept. You might not have all your kit with you. So you might just want to join the monster team, or go and play someone kind of generic, peasant number 3. I had friends that, when both their characters were mugged by other players on the last night of an event, the next morning they bought a few little bits of kit and walked around playing married hobbits, and they got to, because they were married in real life, do all the coupley things and stuff like that they couldn't get to do with their normal characters. So you can have kind of throwaway characters to play over the end of a weekend. If you're at a sanctioned event, again, you might want to just join up with a monster team and help hit the other players. But once that event is finished, you're going to want to take some time and start thinking about your next character. Now, depending on the system you're playing in, this will probably have some sort of restriction. For example, the vampire games we ran, we always ran with the rule that you couldn't create your new character as either the same clan or the same covenant. Now, vampire clans are roughly the same as a race, and covenants are roughly the same as a political leaning, and it's the combination of those two that generally has a lot to do with the stereotyping of what a traditional character of that combination would be. So to kind of help you have that break of not just going back and playing a very similar character again, and allow the other players and characters to let you establish yourself as a new character, it was really useful to have those restrictions in place. In something that's a more free-form event, you will possibly want to just create a character that's quite distinctive from your previous one. And sometimes that can be quite an issue. And there have, as I mentioned, been quite a few players over the recent months that have decided that they are going to move to different groups or different factions, and therefore groups within those new factions, to allow themselves to have that break, to have that establishment as a new character before they come back into the same group. It may also be that over a long period of time other people have done this, and people that you originally started out a group with have all moved on and joined a different group, and you've stayed behind because you didn't want to kill off your character. So sometimes these things are pre-planned, sometimes you take the space between events to sort of work out where you'd like to go next and talk over people out of character. But that's a really useful tool. A lot of us, once we've been playing our characters for a little while, do start coming up with our next character concept. Sometimes they will fit within existing groups and sometimes they won't. So I hope I've gone over the basic of how death works in LARP and given you a few helpful hints and tips to make it a less unpleasant experience for you. If you have any questions, comments, queries, please do go to the Facebook group and join in the discussion there. And I will see you all next time. Happy LARPing!